You think a jacket is what keeps you alive in winter. It isn't. For most of human history, humans survived temperatures that would kill a modern person in hours, and they did it with no heating, no insulated boots, and often no clothes at all above the waist. So picture this instead. 40,000 years ago, somewhere in what is now Siberia. The sun is gone by mid-afternoon. The wind doesn't stop, and a group of humans is settling in for a night that, by any modern standard, should not be survivable. Here's the problem nobody talks about. Humans are not built for cold. Not really. We have almost no fur. Our skin is thin. Compared to almost every other mammal on this planet, we are catastrophically bad at holding on to our own body heat. A fox can sleep outside at -30 without a second thought. A human, unprotected, starts losing consciousness in under an hour. So how did we do it? Not for a season. Not for one brutal winter. For tens of thousands of years across some of the coldest environments the planet has ever produced. The first answer is clothing. And not clothing the way we think of it now, something you grab off a hanger. Clothing as a technology our species had to invent from nothing. For a long time, archaeologists didn't have direct proof any of this existed. Skin and fur don't survive tens of thousands of years in the ground, so scientists had to look for the tool that made the clothing, not the clothing itself. That tool was the needle, a small-eyed sewing needle made from bone. The oldest one found so far comes from Siberia, and it's roughly 40,000 years old. Around the same time, needles start appearing at sites across the Caucasus, then East Asia, then Europe, always in the coldest regions first. Here's why that matters. A needle means something specific. It means humans weren't just wrapping themselves in loose fur anymore. They were tailoring it, cutting hide to shape, stitching tight seams that actually sealed out wind. At a site in Austria called Grubgraben, where the average yearly temperature at the time hovered a few degrees below freezing, archaeologists found dozens of these needles alongside piles of reindeer bones and teeth. Not random reindeer, specifically targeted reindeer, taken for their thick winter coats, then cut and sewn into fitted clothing. Researchers studying similar sites in Wyoming found something almost identical, just 14,000 years later and half a world away. Needles made from the bones of foxes, hares, even mountain lions. One of the researchers involved put it plainly. Once people had garments like that, they had the capacity to expand into places they'd previously been shut out of, because before, that cold simply meant death. Clothing didn't just keep people warm. Clothing opened the door to an entire hemisphere. But clothing alone doesn't get you through an Ice Age night. You also need somewhere to be. In 1965, a farmer in Ukraine was digging out his cellar and hit something hard. It turned out to be a jawbone, a mammoth jawbone, and as archaeologists kept digging, they found more. Eventually, in a village called Mezhirik, they uncovered the remains of 4 circular huts built from a combined total of nearly 150 mammoth bones. Skulls and long bones set upright into the ground, forming a kind of foundation. Tusks and ribs stacked and angled on top. A hearth sitting almost exactly in the center of each one. Archaeologists believe the whole structure was likely covered in hide, turning a frame of bone into something closer to an insulated tent, built to survive some of the harshest winters this planet has produced in the last 100,000 years. Some of these dwellings weren't just used once. Recent dating on one of the structures suggests it may have stood and been reused for as long as 4 centuries. Not a shelter thrown up for one bad night. Something closer to inherited architecture, built by one generation and still standing for the next, and the one after that. Fire at the center, bone for a frame, hide for a wall. That was the entire technology stack standing between a human body and a cold that should have ended it. And here's what's strange. Our bodies were never fully passive in all this either. Every human alive today still carries a tissue called brown fat. Unlike ordinary fat, which just stores energy, brown fat burns it directly into heat. Researchers studying people with regular cold exposure have found something remarkable. After weeks of repeated exposure to cold, the body doesn't just tolerate it better, it physically increases the amount of active brown fat it's carrying. The cold becomes more bearable, not because the person toughens up mentally, but because their biology quietly re-equips itself. For most of human history, that system was in constant use. Cold wasn't an occasional inconvenience. It was the default condition for a third of the year. Brown fat wasn't a curiosity. It was infrastructure. So what happened to it? The honest answer is central heating happened to it. Most modern humans now spend the overwhelming majority of their lives inside a narrow, artificial temperature band somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees year-round. Researchers who've studied this have found that people living in these consistently heated environments carry noticeably less active brown fat than people who experience regular cold exposure. We didn't lose the tissue. We just stopped giving it a reason to switch on. We built an entire civilization specifically so that our ancestors' hardest-won adaptation would never have to activate again. And there's something almost funny about that if you sit with it. The people who built mammoth-bone houses by hand, who stitched their own clothing out of reindeer hide with a bone needle, who kept a fire alive through a Siberian night with nothing but wood and attention, would have found our version of winter almost impossible to understand. Not because it's harder, because it's invisible. We solved the entire problem so completely that most of us have never once had to think about it. You still have the body they had. The same thin skin, the same brown fat, quietly sitting there, mostly unused. The same nervous system that used to know exactly how to survive a night like the one in Siberia 40,000 years ago. You just have a jacket now, and a thermostat. And you'll never have to find out if the body underneath still remembers how.